Welcome to this lesson on Introduction to Pivot Tables, and we're also going to be looking at pivot charts. So a pivot table, what is a pivot table exactly? It's a very powerful tool used extensively for data processing. And it's very powerful because it allows one to take a large amount of data and to easily summarize it. So very fast, very efficient at summarizing a large chunk of data, and also allowing us to view it in various dimensions. So just with a few clicks, we can summarize, hundreds of rows, right? Without having to insert a whole bunch of formulas. So you've seen what we've gone through before. And when you look at how easy it is, then you will appreciate the power of pivot tables, and you will learn to love it just like everybody else who has had exposure to pivot tables. When you go pivot, you never go back. So we're just going to have a look at the finished product here. So this is what we're going to be producing. This is a pivot table. These are some slicers that's often used when we construct pivot tables, and we have, of course, our charts similar to the ones that we did before, but I'm just going to have a slight variation to the bar chart that was done before. So let's get to it. Let us reproduce. So we start off with the revenue by sales rep and product category. Let's see how quickly we can come up with this pivot table. Okay. So in general, when we're creating a pivot table, we can simply click into a cell within the table. So as long as it's a cell that's a part of the table, so if this is the table as defined by the selection I've just made here, then which goes from A2 and it references straight across to column J and down to row 13, then any cell that I click into, so if I click into A2 and I go to insert pivot table, Excel is automatically going to reference all the cells within that table. Notice this window pops up here. It says create pivot table, and when you look at that range, you see A2 through to J13. And we can see that here based on the visual. Great. So let's just look at clicking into another cell within this same table. So if I click on D7, insert pivot table, and I see again where that same reference is being made, so the same range, and I can see here that the same cells are being referenced, identified automatically by Excel as the table that we're going to be using for this pivot table. But in our specific case here, we do not want this last row. So what we will have to do is we're actually going to have to make a selection for that. So we're going to do something a little bit different where we're going to be selecting rather than just clicking into one cell within the table. So you'll see that in a second. We are going to click into our table. We're going to actually block it off. Everything except that total row. And we are now going to click pivot table. So pivot table is found under insert, and we are going to click into pivot table after blocking. So remember, we block and then we perform the action. So the action is creating a pivot table using that data. And this will come up, create pivot table, and it will give us the option to either put the pivot table on a new worksheet or an existing worksheet. We want to do it on an existing worksheet. So let's go right ahead. So I want it to be somewhere over here. So let's just click into that. Click OK. All right, great. So what we're doing now is we're having sales reps. So the first thing that we do, let's try to understand what a pivot table is doing. So the pivot table what you're doing is you are identifying first a metric, and then based on that metric, you are going to decide whether or not what level of granularity do you want, or what level of summarization do you want? How do you want to view that data? So for example, we're looking at revenue, that is our metric, but we're not just looking at revenue in aggregate. We don't just want one lump sum figure for revenue. We want to see what is the revenue by sales rep. So that by, whenever we say by, it's normally defining the dimension. So the dimension in this case would be sales rep. And we're also going to use another dimension of product category, right? Because we are viewing the revenue. So we're taking a particular metric. That's what we're trying to track. And we want to view that metric. We want it broken down by sales rep, in this case, as well as product category. So that's always what you have to focus on. That's what's important. What's the metric, and how do we want to view it? What's the dimension, right? What dimensions are going to be relevant? Okay, we can have a time dimension. So we could have breakdown and see, but in this case, we only worked with 2 different days. But we could have had that, right? And you could have a region dimension if it is sort of a location dimension. So you're looking at by country or by region. In this case, we don't have that data, so that wouldn't be relevant for us. Okay, so let's just stick to what we have. And we've been able to produce that. So look at that, just in a couple clicks. So it only took really 1, 2, 3 clicks, and we have already been able to produce the information that we need. All we need now is simply to sort. So all we're going to do is to format and sort. So we're just tidying up this pivot table. So let's go right ahead and right click. And when we right click, we look for sort, and we say yes, sort largest to smallest. So it does that, no problem. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're simply going to tidy up in terms of the column titles. So we can put sales rep. Great. And then when it comes to the column labels, we want to say product category. Excellent. And then here, we want to do some formatting as well. So we can just click in and we do a right click, right? And we can go to value field settings, and we can click on number format, and we go to number format, and we click on separator, and it automatically comes up with the decimal places which we want, and we click OK. Great. So all we're doing now is to tidy up. So we're just bordering, and we're going to border all throughout. And just for consistency, I love to have that double border at the bottom, since that's a summation. Great. So notice every time we click in the pivot table, then we have that. Now, what if we were to accidentally click and hide that? When we go in, we don't find it anymore. So how do we get it back? We click on Analyze, and we click Field List, and you'll get it back. So not to worry. Okay, if you've lost it, no problem. You can get it back by going Analyze and then Field List. Just click on it to make sure that, notice it's shaded. Okay, that means it's activated there. Great.